thank you for everyone joining for the second episode in the CBS Global Insight series, Making Work More Human. My name is Stephen Suter, and I lead the Insight series in my role as the Global Insights Program Manager. My background is in ergonomic design, and I have a passion for exploring how design impacts performance. For those of you who don't yet know us, CBS, or Colebrook Bosson Saunders, is an organization revolutionizing workspaces through innovative ergonomic solutions. And for over 3 decades, we've been bridging the gap between people and technology, creating award-winning ergonomic tools that don't just support technology, they enhance human performance, fostering healthier, more productive work environments. From sleek offices to dynamic healthcare settings, we're shaping the future of work, one ergonomic solution at a time. Today, I am delighted to introduce our guests, Kirsty, Development Director at HLW's Specialty Studios, and Chanel Dehond, Global Director at HLW's Brand X. Kirsty brings over 15 years of international experience across the workplace and real estate sectors, specializing in employee experience. She is a certified professional ergonomist and a Fitwell ambassador and an active member of both the Well and Cornet communities. Chanel is a Toronto-born, London-based designer with over 15 years of experience and leads HLW's signage, wayfinding, and brand experience studio, Brand X. Her work spans award-winning experiential design, editorial contributions, large-scale artwork, and a professorship at Parsons School of Design. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Just as a reminder, please use the chat box to ask any questions and share observations throughout the session. We will be putting your questions to both the speakers following their presentation. With that, Kirsty, Chanel, it is over to you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve. I think you were giving away our ages there with our number of years experience. So we're definitely both millennials, let's put it that way. But we'll get started. Thank you so much for having us. We're absolutely thrilled to be here, and hopefully going to offer you a sort of new topic, a little bit of a different perspective when it comes to this topic. So Chanel and I were chatting yesterday, and we were sort of laughing because we know you're all on a screen right now watching this webinar with us and this topic area, and the topic is high tech, low touch. So I guess there's a bit of irony in this experience for us all here, but hopefully you'll take some good insights here. And as we go through, we'll share some case studies and things. What we want to sort of bridge this topic around is really those digital interfaces where they do perform in some areas, but actually where they're quietly failing in other areas as well, and sort of thinking about technology a bit more in a concerted effort, and then thinking about that sort of physical low touch environments where we might balance the two here. Now, we know that at least 50% of you are multitasking or switching between tasks right now. We hope not too much, but we know you will be, and we'll sort of be losing attention in about 10-15 minutes or so here. So as we are good humans to you all, we have front-loaded this presentation with the data and insights, and the second part of the presentation is going to be all about case studies and solutions. And really those solutions are here to inspire you to create better and really more human environments, as Steve mentioned previously as well.
Hi, everyone. I won't do such a long introduction because Stephen did a great job, but I'm Chanel Dehond. As he said, I'm the Global Director of Brand X, which is HLW's in-house signage, wayfinding, and brand experience team. I've been in the architecture, art, and design industry for upwards of 15 years, as he said, and my work as an artist, illustrator, and professor has always been about making this sometimes exclusive world more approachable to the widest audience possible. Admittedly, I can't intuitively feel my right from my left, so I use physical signage, which is a dot on my left hand, to tell the difference.
That's amazing. I love that fact about Chanel. Hi everyone, I'm Kirsty. I'm a development director here at HLW, and I work across all of our specialty studios, one of those of course being Brand X. I guess my work lives in how environments impact health and that overall employee experience. I've studied ergonomics and human factors, have spent sort of the last 12, 15 years in that environment here and now at HLW, thinking about it from a more design and built environment perspective, and we're thrilled to be here. So let's get stuck in. I'll take you through maybe just a brief definition of what ergonomics is. If you've been around the CBS webinars for a while, I'm sure Stephen has shared this definition. I toyed with the idea of sharing the International Ergonomics Association definition, but it would have filled multiple slides because there's so many words to it. So we're going to distill it down to a simple handful of words here, which is fitting work to people and not the other way around. And it comes from the Greek words ergon, meaning to work, and nomos, meaning natural laws. And ergonomics is broadly split up into three areas. So you've got physical, which probably most of us are most familiar with, and that's your, if you think about the workplace, that chair, desk, monitor type of environment, monitor arm environment. The cognitive side of things is more that human-computer interaction. So how we utilize software on your laptops, as an example, or digital signage, digital wayfinding, that sort of thing. And then you've got the organizational aspect, which is creating systems and processes that enable us to move around a space. Now, it's not all about sort of making one of these areas better. It's about utilizing all three, physical, cognitive, and organizational, to create this real holistic way of environment, or a way of navigating an environment here. And at its core, ergonomics is designing for the brain's oldest operating system, which prioritizes movement, threat detection, and that spatial orientation. And really, that's all about survival. And we want to dig into that topic a little bit more today. So let me just sort of draw your attention to a bit more of that cognitive side of things. As we mentioned earlier, we know that some of you are going to be distracted with other devices. Maybe you've got a smartwatch on, a phone nearby, or you've got split screens going on. Hopefully, as much of that focus is coming this way as possible here. Now, the intention with technology was always good. It was meant to make our lives easier and better. But the problem is we've overlaid that technology on top of our work instead of integrating it. And so now we're switching between apps, notifications, calls on a very consistent and constant basis here, which is really causing us quite a lot of stress and exhaustion. And the problem with that, and perhaps the business problem with that, because it's overloading our sort of short-term memory load, it's increasing our, or should I say, decreasing our performance. It's increasing error rates, our accuracy drops, and our confidence starts to fall because we're being distracted with all of these different elements here. So we want to sort of find this balance between high tech and then low touch, and as I say, we'll talk about that throughout this presentation. And with all of this, we're certainly very fatigued, and even digital natives, so those who have grown up with technology from a very young age, are fatigued and exhausted by the distractions and level of technology that we're moving in between. And that impacts us from a health perspective. And we've just given you some examples here. Posture obviously is a big one. Our devices are typically in front of us. That prolongs us in a forward head tilt position. It's going to affect our lower back. It's going to shrug our shoulders. You will have all felt that posture. You might even be in it right now. Hopefully not too much, as it's the morning. It affects our vision. We can be, have blurry vision. We can have eye strain, reduced focus, that sort of thing. I tend to recommend the 20-20-20 rule, which is every 20 minutes, look 20 feet away for 20 seconds. And what that does is just naturally help to lubricate the eyes, refocus the eyes, and give you a bit of a break from looking at that bright screen in front of you. And as I mentioned, it affects our memory too. If we're overloading our working memory, it does reduce our recall and decision quality. And of course, it affects our emotional regulation throughout the day. We're heightened in our stress. It affects our mood and resilience. And so this is why, again, it's a real business issue, because whilst we're trying to be very high tech here, some businesses are actually struggling to innovate and retain talent because we're not giving ourselves that break and that time to be creative.
Here's the thing, this isn't just a young people versus old people problem. Right now, for the first time in all of history, 5 generations share this workforce. This means wildly different visual needs, tech tolerance, and cognitive stamina. So any system that we build for the ideal user already is going to fail. And against popular belief, in 10 years, when the field is predominantly made up of us digital natives, burnout will definitely still exist because today Gen Z already reports higher tech fatigue than millennials. So the idea that future workers will just adapt is already statistically false. We need to include integrated technology. It's essential for sure. But every glitch, every loading screen, it will continue to break trust and slow decisions and also add this cognitive stress. So this is why low touch design will still be essential in the future office for this time and for the next generation. 65% of people can't reliably read screens in real world conditions. And it's not necessarily what you think. It's not just eyesight, it's biology. And why is this? Well, age does cause reduction in processing speed and less tolerance to glare. So blue light glasses are becoming a thing. Vision differences, as discussed, low vision, color blindness, and contrast loss. Neurodivergence, this is a big topic right now. 1 in 4 people self-report being in the neurodiverse community, which means that if they have ADHD, if they have dyslexia and autism, this can increase cognitive load even more when there's dense digital interfaces. And one of the most interesting ones is situational impairment, like stress, fatigue, and moving through a space, which happens for us daily, if not hourly. And this is sort of saying that screens are not failing because they're unreadable or blurry. They fail because they require foveal vision. Foveal vision is your precision vision that you use for reading, driving, and recognizing faces. And this requires a very conscious effort. So under stress or while moving, your brain is going to prioritize contrast over content, direction over detail, and landmarks over language. So the screen, it doesn't look broken. Your brain literally deprioritizes it. And that's why you might walk past a glowing toilet sign and ask someone for directions to the toilet. It's not stupidity or tech illiteracy, it's your neurobiology. QR codes, quick response. I just learned this. That's what it stands for. Guess when they were invented? You can put this in the chat box. I'm curious. You can either guess a year or how long ago. I'm seeing 2012. Any other guesses? 2008, 2009, 1998. You're getting much closer. They were actually invented in 1994, but largely ignored until COVID made contactless necessary. During the pandemic, which is sort of why people are probably guessing around the early 2000s or beyond that, QR codes made sense for menus, payments, and contact tracing because they reduced touch and made total sense then. But the problem is that this temporary convenience became permanent for a lot of these businesses. And now we're forced to download everything: loyalty apps, airline apps, authentication apps, wayfinding apps just to find a room in one singular building. And each one adds steps. We have to scan, download, log in, grant permissions, find Wi Fi. People don't want to work for information. Surveys show that 88% of us prefer printed menus and 71% of us abandon apps after first use. That means it's probably time to clean up our phones. Also, contactless often just means self-service. So you're ordering yourself, you're paying, you're navigating. The labor has shifted from the service provider to us, And to add insult to injury, some self-service checkouts are even asking for tips or additional service charges. So these are examples of when QR codes and apps become a barrier to entry, but I want to show you how QR codes can enhance that. So they succeed, QR codes, when you layer in discovery and delight and reward curiosity. So the top two photos are of projects from HLW and Brand X. They are of Bain & Company in Boston. Really great project. Brand X designed a Space Invader style feature wall at reception, which was made from a grid of custom QR codes that feature the company's messaging, icons, and data visuals. So you can see bold, inclusive, true north, and some graphs in there. And it works alone as an Instagrammable moment, but when visitors or employees take a photo in front of the backdrop or of the backdrop, surprise, links pop up on your phone, and it gives you the option to connect to Bain's digital portfolio, culture, and social content. And then in addition, the culture of play plays a big role at Bain & Company. And we know that play boosts mood, it boosts creativity, it boosts well-being, and it's linked to improved engagement and competence at work. So lots of benefits there. Also, the two images that you're seeing in the bottom show different contexts. They succeed when they extend meaning beyond physical. So when they replace some digital sort of integration, but within the physical world. For example, on the bottom left image, you're seeing a mural in Syracuse, New York by Brett Snyder and Irene Cheng. And this is made from hundreds of QR codes, and it represents a historic aerial image of the city. So from far away, it's a landmark, but up close, each code becomes a portal into local art, culture, and community stories. Each of these 100 portals has moments of discovery. And then at the V&A East Storehouse in London, this just opened up. It's a great space. Recommend that you go see it if you're in the area. There are over 250,000 objects and around, I believe, 350,000 books that are on display or in the storehouse. You can't label everything with a physical plaque. So a single QR code at the entry links you to a website, and not an app, but a website that everyone can access without signing in. And it lets visitors explore each artifact deeper by pulling up object histories, archives, and media by typing just the number of that artifact into that website. So in all these cases, QR codes, they're not competing with that human first experience, they enhance it. Now, nothing kills fast truster. I mean, kills trust faster than frozen kiosks, app crashes, or being trapped in a talking lift. We've all probably experienced one of these things. And in many workplaces today, there's a booking versus occupancy mismatch. So studies are showing that 30% of booked meeting rooms never get used because of phantom or ghost bookings that are blocking the space while it sits empty. And I am definitely guilty of this. My project manager messaged me on the side to ask me to release a room that was not being used. And global utilization benchmarks are revealing that this type of smart technology accidentally leaves office space 40 to 60% empty on any given day, which comes at a large real estate cost, 60% empty. Can you imagine? On top of this, smart systems, they fail really loudly. Human factors shows people remember these experiences, these negative experiences, 10 times more strongly than neutral or positive ones. So the risk of having a smart building or smart technology, it's not whether the tech works most of the time, but what happens to trust when it doesn't work. Retention, it's the great battleground in talent, especially in the tech and knowledge sectors. So companies see 25% turnover annually, that's 1 in 4, and a short average tenure of 2 to 3 years for these roles. And it's not all technology, don't get me wrong, but high-tech promises, they do contribute to this, and the data is quite brutal. Employees are facing upwards of 14 negative digital incidents per week. 49%, that's almost half, would consider leaving a company due to bad workplace tech. 80% self-report that tech hasn't improved their performance, even if in some cases this is not the factual statistic. And 89% lose confidence in the technology after a single disappointment, and they revert back to asking people, taking the stairs, and sometimes avoiding coming into the office altogether. So you can see this isn't just a real estate problem. It is definitely one, but it's not just that. It's a retention cost, a productivity cost, a replacement cost, because we think of recruiting, onboarding, lost momentum, and institutional knowledge walking out the door. And to hammer this home, screens perform worse when people are new, when they're late, when they're anxious or injured, and on the move. Under stress, as Kirsty was mentioning, cortisol spikes, attention narrows, and people stop reading and start scanning. So that's not biology. It's not bad behavior. Sorry, it is biology. I'm obviously multitasking right now. That's biology. It's not bad behavior. And physical cues, they align with urgency, while some of these digital interfaces can fight it.
Now, I guess at this point, maybe you think that Chanel and I hate technology, but I don't think that could be further from the truth. We are huge advocates of technology. We just want to sort of give you that more, or offer you that more human perspective. We think that technology can work in brilliant ways, but it has to be sort of logical, well thought out, and appropriate. It doesn't have to be everywhere, just in those key moments where it can help us. We know that 80% of us prefer physical signage, because it works instantly. There's no real hesitation or buffering. There's no instructions needed. Physical signage, actually, we can also see whilst in motion. So whilst we're at that walking speed, physical signage sort of captures our attention much more easily than a digital device does, or something of a technology nature. And it's sort of low pressure for us as well. You know, if we're anxious and stressed and running around the workplace, we tend to miss digital technology and digital signage, whereas physical signage is much more low touch and therefore uses much lower cognitive load as well. We'll give you a few examples now to showcase that. So the top images here are a couple of our projects. So the left-hand side one was a project we did with HD Capital here in London, next to Tower Bridge, beautiful views. So these are very high contrast signs here for meeting rooms or other types of rooms. You've got this white text on top of a black background surface. There's a minimum of 70% contrast here. And then just underneath, we're sort of showcasing that element of Braille as well to make it a very inclusive style of signage too. Now, this type of signage uses the FAST mechanism of our brain, and that's because our brain automatically notices things like contrast, edges, light, and directions. So it's just much more natural for us to navigate when we're seeing these types of signs. The bottom left-hand side here is a project HLW delivered with WISE, and this is here to illustrate different flooring materials. You'll have experienced this in public spaces, definitely. If you think about when you get up to a traffic light system, there are bumps on the pathway to sort of indicate there's either danger or a place to stop before you then cross the road. Or maybe when you're traveling on the tube, when there's sort of hearing impairment, or you're wearing your headphones and you're not listening to mind the gap signs and things like that. Flooring and the differentiating flooring materials can help you and help us navigate much more easily around a space here. Now, Chanel knows this. One of my biggest bugbears is what we call Norman doors. Now, what you're seeing here is an example of a good door. A Norman door is when you go to pull a door open, but in fact you have to actually push it open, and it has the wrong handles to indicate that. So it causes this sort of tactile stress and anxiety when we're moving through a space. It's really as simple as, if you have a push door, putting a flat panel to indicate push and a door handle to indicate pull here. But obviously, if we can't change the handles in environments, which often does happen, there's a cost involved with changing those types of furniture and door items as well. We obviously have to implement signage, and BrandX has had to do this. We've had to implement strategic signage to teach people how to open and close a door. And obviously that's not the most impactful. It's frustrating to have to look at a sign before you then open or close a door. That's not the experience we want to deliver for our people moving around a workplace. So yeah, just some sort of case studies and solutions here that we wanted to share. And then you have landmarks. Now, this is a really, really fascinating element of wayfinding. Chanel's team, BrandX, do this incredibly well. I've walked through some of the spaces that they've designed, and it's just not only beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, but super functional and works really well from a human perspective as well. You know, if everyone recognizes something instantly, it's classified as a landmark. It's this universal form of wayfinding. And we're going to talk you through the different elements of that. So things like vertical anchors, such as staircases, you know, creating that meeting point and that wayfinding point, floor to floor orientation, large scale murals and graphics to create those memorable meet me here moments, rooms named after visible exterior landmarks, and then obviously color and shape for memory as well. And we'll showcase how that can work really effectively inside workplaces. So if we look at high visibility feature staircases here, as you can see, these are very, very bold staircases. I think, you know, not everyone can probably get away with the color scheme of these, but we can certainly all get away with sort of central type of staircases if the building allows. On the top right-hand corner, you've got the wise lime green staircase. Probably only a few people could get away with a huge lime green staircase in the middle of the office. This is a great example, though, of creating collaboration and connection, because it has this element of vertical movement through the floors. And then across each floor, it's close to the pantry, the kitchen, the social areas where we can interact with one another for those ad hoc meetings, or just a place to focus away from our desk and get away and be a bit more creative here as well. Similarly, with the left-hand side, that was a project we did with Canopius, this beautiful burnt orange spiral staircase, creating that flow around the space as well. On the bottom left-hand side, you've got the very, very bold black sort of spiral staircase as well, which meets you in the reception area. Again, a place to grab a coffee or a tea, socialize with your employees and your team, or just have that ad hoc meeting as well. And then lastly, the Meta Facebook staircase, which did win an award, I believe, last year as well. And again, it just sort of has that brand identity attached to it, but is also very, very functional. And what we've done here with these types of landmarks is create and leverage that natural human element of navigation instinct, you know, thinking about scale and space, openness and light when we're creating these landmarks.
So feature walls, murals, and surface graphics, they help to anchor memory, they guide movement, and they shape how people organize space socially. That's why people say things like, meet me by the timeline, or meet me by the Amy Winehouse mural in Camden. The environment becomes the reference system here. Research shows that children learn routes faster using landmarks before even signage, and that's digital signage and physical signage. Now, why mention children? It's because adults, we don't grow out of this. We revert back to these same navigational systems, especially when under stress, distraction, or time pressure. Also, as I've said before, play strengthens this effect. When people discover visual Easter eggs, memory and route recall improve. So you can see this in our McKinsey & Co. Newark project. It's the top two images. located in the Ironside building, which was once a freight warehouse and part of Newark's industrial backbone. We commissioned murals by local public artists for this, Gera Luce and Work, which reference Newark's history. It connects to the community and the company's ESG goals, which is very important. In the bottom left example is Navitas, which shows a brand timeline, which becomes a navigational spine. So it situates the company's work in the evolution of energy. It begins all the way at the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago, and it moves through the company's origins, the patents, and products up this full timeline. So it guides people culturally through the history of the company, but physically guides people towards the Electrify Studio, which is the demo and experience center on the second level. It even doubles as the backdrop for CEO talks and global town halls, which gives virtual and in-person audiences the same landmark. And the last image you're seeing is Fordham University's food hall. That's the bottom right. There's a 70-foot or 20-meter black and white hand-drawn mural of the campus in the greater Bronx area of New York, which aligns with the university's slogan, which is New York is my campus, Fordham is my school. So it's positioning it within the whole city of New York. And for those of you that know me personally, yes, I was the artist commissioned for this piece, which was a great opportunity. And this spot has become a meeting point for students and faculty, as well as for open houses when students or potential students are coming to see the space. It also connects people to fun facts about the legacy because I've scattered little elements throughout the mural, like where's Wally or where's Waldo for those North Americans, and the Loch Ness Monster is in there. So there's all these little I Spy references that people discover throughout. These work as landmarks because humans recognize features faster than text. It's the same system we've used since the beginning of time, so referencing coastlines, mountains, and formations. And Kirsty gently talked about this in the contrast slide, but some of the best landmarks are outside the window. This is HG London. We named rooms and zones after visible exterior landmarks to help people orient themselves instinctively. And this works because, as I've said about my left-right confusion, 15% of the population struggle with this. And a number of people do not orient themselves using cardinal directions. So you might not know where north, east, south, or west is, especially under stress or distraction. So names like HMS, which relates to the HMS Belfast, you can see it out the window in the top right image, and Tower, Market, they increased navigation speed and they took advantage of these real incredible views rather than asking someone to meet in the east quadrant. We also implemented logical numbering systems, which were tied to floors and levels. You'd be surprised how many spaces put 612 on the second floor. That's not very intuitive. And with this, you can also the idea of you can see it, you can find it approach. We also created custom universal icons for this client to ensure that every drawer, cabinet, and receptacle was clearly labeled. And this prevents you from having to open and close every drawer to find your spoon or your mug or your bowl. It's surprising. I do this in my own home, which is very strange because I should really know where everything is. And spaces with potentially an ambiguous functions, so like a wellness room, they use layered iconography, so like the prayer icon, the meditation icon, and the lactation icon to clarify the use without having text-heavy instructions printed and posted on the door. Color is processed faster than text. Research shows that color and basic shape are processed within 150 milliseconds, while reading and language takes 2 to 3 times longer. I mean, it's still pretty quick. But combined with shape and material, color becomes instruction-free. This project is Kiowa Kirin. You can also find out more on our website. Brand X's wayfinding strategy was designed around quadrants that were tied to brand colors, and it was tied to the company's therapeutic areas like neurology, nephrology, oncology, and immunology. Some of you might kind of recognize those images. And rooms were also named after the items that were in that color family. So the tidal room was in the blue neighborhood, or the iris room, if you know irises, they were in the purple neighborhood. There were also 4 distinct plasma-inspired shape signs. So we use these different plasma shapes to define the space function. And this is more intuitive, but every single meeting room had one plasma shape, while every single support space had a different shape. And environments that use consistent color and shape cues, they improve navigation speed, along with all these landmarks that we've both discussed. This means that the brain absorbs color, material, and shape subconsciously, and it makes orientation happen during movement, not just as a separate standstill task, having to read a directory. So the pivot point in our presentation is that high-tech experiences don't necessarily require screens or digital interfaces. Sometimes they do, but we can do this without incorporating these interfaces. We can transform legacy, brand, and data into physical graphics that reflect cutting-edge technology and forward-thinking culture. We can also harness illumination or light to guide, highlight, and orient, and it feels high-tech without that digital interaction. And we can specify innovative materials like dichroic films, gradients, and metallic finishes to also do this as well. So when design does the work, the idea is that technology disappears. It creates a space that feels high tech with low touch and hopefully low cost execution. This is one of my favorite projects that we've done. This is Lord Abbott's global headquarters in Jersey City. And what we did here was we translated a deeply traditional financial institution, almost 100 years old, into a space that feels unmistakably high tech without relying on screens or apps. The top left image, it shows a surface graphic made up of these pixels of binary code. So from afar, you can read this archival image. It's of a female employee working on a CRT computer in the 1980s. This matters because Lord Abbott was early in adopting technology, and they were very progressive in elevating women in the workplace. The top right photograph captures the glass manifestations or film or foils. We all call them different things, but these were throughout the building. And these abstract antique financial graphs that were pulled from annual reports dating back to 1940. And one of my favorite interventions, you can kind of see the movement, hopefully the animation on the bottom left, are the marbleized portals. They reinterpret traditional hand-painted portraits of the firm's founding partners. This is in the early 1900s. So rather than displaying these portraits, which could present a narrow or dated image of leadership, Brand X digitally abstracted them into wall coverings, which actually match the marbleization on the early inner covers of Lord Abbott's financial reports. And these are paired with plaques that do contain the image of the original portrait. So it preserves the history, but expresses it in a way that feels contemporary. And lastly, the bottom right image represents a highly ornamental magnified stock certificate border. I'd be impressed if anyone knew what this was called, this type of art, but it's called scripophily. And scripophily, before digital trading, it helped to apply credibility to paper. It allowed trust to live on paper because stock certificates, they were the interface. They used pattern and detail to establish that credibility before data was read. And what we have here is a magnified scarpophily detail that brings that historical Lord Abbot DNA into the space, because this was custom for Lord Abbot. So overall, the space feels technologically fluent, but it still represents that legacy of Lord Abbot's brand.
I love that project. Just looks so good. Yeah, great work, team. So obviously, you know, light has been guiding humans for millennia, from lighthouses to headlights, long before screens even existed here. And in modern workplaces or contemporary workplaces, illumination becomes that silent interface. So, you know, we're thinking it directs movement, it signals that importance, and it also helps us orientate around a space as well, without ultimately asking anything of the user as well. Now, I won't go through all of the case studies here, but I want to highlight the top right-hand one here, which is BCG, and that's the infinity mirror that you see sort of on the right-hand part of it here. And this sort of, I guess you'd call it art or light installation. It creates depth, it creates immersion and infinite space. Similar to that, I guess, of a video game. I'm not a gamer personally, but it does create that sort of technology vibe as you move through a space and see this sort of installation here, which creates this high-tech viewpoint. And really, it's quite simple. It's just lighting that we've implemented here. And what's powerful across all of these scenarios, you know, you've got the logos being backlit, you've got company values also lit around the space to really enhance that sort of high-tech perspective here. But what's powerful is that that all feels very, very digital by association. And importantly, it works day and night. It's not just one part of the day, it's across the whole day where this light illumination works for us and helps us navigate the space here. Now, all of these examples here showcase high-tech design, not because it's necessarily interactive. We don't have to, you know, work with an app or log in anywhere or touch a control panel. It's immersive in its own right. That lighting is very immersive and ultimately then very deeply human as well. So I'll showcase also some material examples now. So we've talked about light. This is another example of how you can create that sort of dynamicism as you move through a space. So at the top left-hand corner here, you've got thermochromic paint, and that's the thermochromic paint wall. And this reacts to touch or movement, as you can see here. When you're planting your hand, it sort of creates that hand effect on the wall itself. On the bottom left-hand side, as Chanel mentioned earlier, there's dichroic film across this pane of glass. Now, actually, this is one piece of glass in the same area. So it's both pictures that you see on the bottom are in reception, both the same sides of that glass as well. On the left-hand side, you see that sort of purple hue, which is the brand color of PlayQ and really illuminates that brand identity. But as you move through the glass, as you walk through it, maybe seeing it from different angles, a different seat in reception perhaps, it starts to move through this lovely yellow-orange hue here as well. And that movement as you're walking through creates this dynamic element for the brain to understand that we're in this sort of interesting high-tech environment here, but realistically, it's just film across glass, which looks fantastic as well. And on the right-hand side, you've got these elements of gradient. So this is actually a project we did with Cognizant. This is a room, a very high-tech room. It's an AI demo test environment. So as you can imagine, high levels of technology I've probably never used before, and probably quite scary, but high-tech AI solutions here. And what we wanted to do was create something that collaborated really well with that type of environment, the high-tech notion, but bring a bit more of that human touch to it. So this art installation, this sort of blue art installation you see on the left-hand side, is full of gradients that depict AI and data. And so whilst you're in this environment, testing, demoing all this different technology, you still in sort of the art installation have this human element, but still has a nod to technology as well. And similarly to the bottom right-hand side, it's that light illumination with the gradient that sort of guides you through the doors and into reception here as well. Now, as we come to the last couple of slides of the presentation, hopefully you found it super interesting with the sort of insights at the forefront and the case studies and solutions to sort of inspire you, I guess, for your workplace experiences. We wanted to highlight, a very important topic and prevalent topic at the moment. High-tech solutions can be really efficient, they can be really useful, but if they're not thought out properly, it can be quite costly and expensive to upgrade. If you think about your own phone, it takes a couple of years, or every couple of years you're upgrading it. Our computers and laptops every 3 to 5 years are being upgraded as well, which is forcing these constant reinvestments of IT equipment, and that just not only costs a lot of money, but it creates a very outdated space very, very quickly. And if we then zoom into more of that environmental cost, if you have a look here, frequent hardware refreshes contribute to 62 million tons of global e-waste, and that's projected to reach 82 million by 2030. Now, I think all of you will agree that that's just unacceptable in our day and age now, and we need to get better at this. So how can we think about this in a more sort of consistent and thoughtful way? And just as a side note, that means throwing away 8,000 Eiffel Towers per year. That's the amount of waste that we're wasting with these constant hardware upgrades and tech upgrades as well. 8,000 Eiffel Towers being thrown away every single year. So when sustainability is now a line item, it's also a reputational issue. It becomes a really important factor as you think about employee experience, as you think about these high tech and low touch solutions here. So we just wanted to highlight this. I know it seems like a bit of a Debbie Downer slide, but it's a really important factor here that we wanted to note with you all.
So as you've probably experienced this meeting, cognitive fatigue is real. Most of you will only retain about 10% of what you saw in this webinar, but we did use a little magic trick on you called priming and attention enhancement, which means that once your brain notices something, you'll process it faster and remember it later. So you will notice Norman doors now, you will notice tactile floors, QR code menus, and broken kiosks everywhere. We're very sorry about this. The takeaway is that low touch design, it's not anti-innovation, it's anti-failure. It works when people can't, when they're late, when they're stressed, when they're distracted. It's accessible, it's inclusive, and it's sustainable by default. And it ages gracefully, unlike your laptop, your phone, or your digital signage that'll probably be obsolete by next year. So in short, low touch design, it removes some points of friction, it reduces failure, and it often lowers costs and lets people kind of get where they need to go without thinking. The real resolution isn't pixels, screens, or refresh rates, it's clarity, the ability to see, understand, and navigate effortlessly. High tech when it matters, low touch when it counts, for humans, not hardware. Thank you.
Wow, absolutely amazing, guys. That was so insightful and absolutely inspiring. I have been monitoring the chat, and there have been a number of questions that have come through. Please keep those coming. We have just under 10 minutes, so I hope I can get through all of them. But the first question that came through from Abby was, why are Gen Z and Gen Alpha, the most digital generations, actually feeling the most burnt out by tech?
Kirsty, would you like to
Yeah, well,
take this
so
one?
was the question Gen Z and Gen Alpha? I think that's the sort of older generation. Just correct me, Chanel, before
Gen Alpha is the newer one. So
Gen Alpha, okay, sorry.
They
Gen Alpha and Gen Z are the newer
just
generation.
ended. Yeah.
They're digital natives, so they've grown up with technology from a very young age. You will have seen those sort of newspaper articles of toddlers at 2 years old sort of zooming into a newspaper, because they've been used to looking and seeing parents and people around them using technology. So First of all, I guess they've started so young, so they're probably just exhausted and fatigued from the length of time using technology. You know, millennials have, and like Chanel and I, probably Stephen too, um, we've had that luxury of growing up with sort of low technology environments. We didn't have access to phones and things like that, probably pre 14, 15 years old. But then as we come into teenage, secondary school and university, that sort of became more prevalent. So we've had the luxury of both there. Whereas this newer generation, they're fatigued by the length of time, first of all. And then secondly, it's just constant every year, well, not even every year anymore. Every day, every week, every month, new technology arises, a new device comes to the market, a new app is being developed, and we're just being distracted constantly by everything here. And the younger generation, and you know, it's probably to do with partly the pandemic as well, haven't had that sort of training in face-to-face communication either, and sort of connecting with people in person. And so they're just overwhelmed by the technology and the devices that they're working with, and haven't had that social interaction as much as probably some of us have been used to as well. So there's just a lot of things at play here. I don't think there's one thing that I could say is the real reason for the burnout, but just a combination of issues.
Yeah, I
No,
would
for
say
sure.
to add to that too, fluency doesn't necessarily mean resilience, because we still are all
Mm.
human, so we do have these natural instincts to want to, socialize and be bored even at some points in time, but there is this nonstop attention demand that is required for the Gen Z and Gen Alpha generations.
Awesome. Then we have a question from Matt, and I think it ties in quite nicely. He says, what piece of workplace tech that companies think is helping, but employees actually quietly avoid?
I can take this one if you'd like.
Yeah.
So, digital wayfinding and informational kiosks. I think that's a big one. It's a big investment, not just for the hardware, but also the software. There's somebody that has to upkeep the 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 information on these kiosks, making sure it's always up to date. And people walk past them because they require stopping and reading and sometimes interacting. Like when you go into a mall and you want to find the Zara, you might have to go floor to floor. Under stress or motion, the brain is prioritizing the contrast and direction. They don't want to stop and review the content. So more people would rather go to a receptionist or the help desk at the mall to ask where something is than stop at these informational kiosks. And like I said, it comes at a huge cost to the company. So I do believe that this form of workplace tech at this moment in time is not as helpful or as useful.
And also probably I would say the panels that go on meeting rooms, Steve. You know, when you go into a meeting room, half the time they're booked up, but there's no one inside them. You don't know what to do. Do you just wait for someone to come, or do you risk it and go and sit in the meeting room? Or you're in the meeting room because it says it's available, but actually someone has a meeting booked and it hasn't quite, collaborated with the technology. I think we've just kind of starting to ignore it and sort of just just risk it and be a bit more human in that nature as well. And the problem is when you have an environment where you have to constantly ask people for help, you lose that level of dignity and autonomy over yourself and how to work with the space and the technology you're using. And that's the worst type of experience. If you have to go and ask where the bathroom is or the toilet is as an adult, it's just not fun. We can all do it and it's fine, it's not that big a deal. But if you're constantly doing that, it does become quite frustrating.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
poking your head into a room that has a
Yeah.
meeting. It's a lot of this sort of Gen X and the boomers, they're comfortable maybe popping in and being like, "Oh, sorry, didn't know this was in use." But a lot of the new generations feel a bit more concerned about interrupting, so the meetings end up being left, or the meeting room spaces end up being left
Yeah.
unused.
Yeah, I get what you're saying there. Like sometimes it feels like just using tech for the sake of it. Like what's wrong with just like an analog, yeah, this is being used, this is not
Or like
being
a
used.
viewing window or something. Like
Yeah.
if it has privacy film, maybe you have a little cutout or something like that in order to just peep in and double check if the room's available.
Yeah, I mean, and then going into the sustainability thing, like every one of those meeting rooms now has a screen that's going to have to be updated in a couple of years. So yeah. Another question here from Anupam, I think this will probably have to be the last one, is if physical cues work so well, why do organizations keep defaulting to these screens that we've been talking about?
Well, I think to start off, screens, they feel measurable, they feel modern, like we're saying. Like when you're thinking of a high-tech company or one of the big five, you're imagining walking into a space that's going to feel technological. So you're expecting sort of like these LED screens or these digital ways of performing wayfinding. They promise flexibility as well. So you think, oh, well, I won't have to change this sign if the room name changes. But ultimately, that also comes at a cost, or it comes at um, like a time contribution as well. Like you might have to hire somebody to continually update this information. And if it is incorrect, it's going to break that trust as well. So having an insert sign or something that could be printed and exchanged quicker actually is more flexible than sometimes having that digital monitor that can change. And I'm not saying it's always the right instance, but organizations, they do default to this because they think, oh, it's more flexible, it's more modern, and it's harder to justify physical signage on a spreadsheet.
The next question is from Renee. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She says, with the rise of AI and digital experiences, do you feel we have reached almost a point of digital fatigue?
I can start off this one. It kind of reminds me, the second half of the question too, because I read it. It's sort of
Yes.
like, are we leaving consumers that reside in financially deprived areas too? It reminds me of the book Ready Player One, or I guess there was a movie, but it is very different than the book. And I do think like in a lot of cases, this does leave out certain individuals, but there is opportunity with AI to grant people education and have people have access to different kind of resources that they normally wouldn't. So if you look at a library, for example, or just getting information, there is a lot of AI usage to that. So if you give anybody a phone or a connection, a free connection to this sort of Wi-Fi network, there is ways to educate yourself without going to post-secondary school or get information quickly online. And AI, it doesn't just mean robots, or we all know this. It's also just like Google searches, or it's Grammarly, like helping with spell check on your phones or resources. So it does give a lot of people opportunity to kind of better themselves or better the way that they're presenting themselves forward. I do think it has reached a point of digital fatigue, though. I think we need to balance those experiences. And also, we don't want to lose our ability to actually spell words, which, or remember phone numbers. Like, how many phone numbers do you have memorized? Probably not that many anymore. So it it's a balance there.
Yeah, I think
That's
we
something
mentioned this. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
no, I was just going to say, it's something I've noticed on Teams. There's been a recent update where it auto corrects your spelling mistakes, and I keep on looking down and seeing the words changing and going, wow, I can't spell it all.
I mean, that does kind of relieve some of the stress too. So there is a balance with what kind of AI we're using. And I do think there is a conversation to be had about what access people do have in areas that are not as financially accessible.
Yeah, we talked about that definition of ergonomics earlier, sort of, ergon meaning to work and nomos meaning natural laws. And I think as long as we're being very thoughtful about how we integrate AI and technology into our work, it can absolutely be a game changer, I think, for all of us. But if we're just overlaying it and not being thoughtful about how it can integrate and how it can enhance our experience, then it is just going to continue to get more and more and more overwhelming for us. And as Chanel mentioned, I think we are already at that crux of digital fatigue, and it potentially might get worse sort of this year as the AI programs, come out every day, every week at the moment. But hopefully with some of this content and education, we'll start to sort of navigate away from that and really properly, operationally as a business, integrate technology with that human experience.
Perfect. Just going back to the core content, Kelsey's asked, what's a good rule of thumb for deciding when to use a screen versus a physical cue?
I can start this one off. I think the basic information is if you're in motion, if it's a space where you're expecting people to be moving or potentially under stress, like one of the slides showed hospitals or these kind of spaces where you're not, thinking straight, that's when you really want to use a low touch physical moment. And if it's optional or it's detailed or exploratory or there's time to kind of explore further, like at a museum or, in the context where you're relaxed or have time to play, I think screens are a great opportunity, or technology is a great opportunity for depth.
And even if you consider environments like airports or train stations, you have these giant monitors which have your train times and the gate of where your plane's flying from. That's like a really good example of good use of technology. But then, physical signage to get you to that point, to get you to the gate, that's where it really works well in harmony.
Yeah, because as Kirsty's saying, if you're able to stand and look at this monitor, that's a great point for digital signage. But while you're moving, while you're trying to get to the gate, you need that physical signage.
And there's a question from Rebecca that goes into this physical signage. She says, how do you account for cultural context when designing signage? Is universal truly universal?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it's difficult to be fully universal, but I will say that even with language, you can't be fully universal when you're including text on signs. But there are images that are as universal as you kind of can get, like a toilet, for example. Most people kind of know what a toilet looks like. Most people might know what, certain cutlery or certain silverware looks like. But again, like as I'm saying different words, silverware is maybe how we would say it in the US or Canada, and cutlery in the UK. There's lifts and elevators. There's all different kinds of like variations when it comes to language. So I do think universal is a big term. It's hard to be fully universal, but there are ways to do that with signage. And I think icons and pictograms get pretty close.
I mean, Rebecca did also make an observation that fork, spoon symbol, tiny, simple, life-changing details. So I agree that perhaps symbols are a lot easier to be universal than certainly language. I am just cognizant of time, so I think we're going to leave it there. I would just like to extend a massive thank you from myself and on behalf of CBS to both you and to Kirsty and Chanel for being such exceptional guests in the series. We are truly grateful for your time and the passion that you brought to this vital topic. And then a big thank you to all of you who joined the call today. Thank you so much for being here. We hope you found the session both insightful and inspiring. I know I certainly did. When you leave the call, you are going to be directed to the sign-up page for our next episode in the series, where we will be joined by author and renowned multi-award-winning workplace thought leader Simone Fenton Jarvis. We'd love to see you there, so please do register if you're interested. And with that, I will bring today's session to a close.